Hello and welcome back at the FinetLink channel, and we are here with wireless LAN concept where we explain how wireless LAN enable network connectivity. So we described wireless LAN technology and standards. We even describe the component of wireless LAN infrastructure. And then we explain how wireless LAN technology enables wireless LAN operation. And what we will do in this video will be about explaining how a wireless controller use control and provision of wireless access point to manage multiple access point. We will describe channel management in a wireless LAN, and we will describe threats to a wireless LAN and the wireless LAN security mechanism. So let's go through those topics step by step. Control and provision of wireless access point is a standard protocol that enables a wireless controller to manage multiple access points on a wireless LAN. Control and provisioning of wireless access point is also responsible for encapsulation and forwarding of wireless client traffic between an access point and a wireless controller. This is based on the key component of control and provision of wireless access point is the concept of split media access control. The control and provision of wireless access points will split MAC concept, and this will do all the function normally performed by individual access point and distributes them between two functional components, the AP MAC functions and wireless control MAC function. And here functions are shown here in this table for each of those two functional components. We mentioned that control and provision of wireless access point is based on lightweight access point protocol, but adds additional security with datagram transport layer security. And this datagram transport layer security is a protocol which provides security between the access point and the wireless controller. It also allows them to communicate using encryption and prevents eavesdropping or tampering. Datagram transport layer security is enabled by default to secure the control and provision of wireless access points control channel, but is disabled by default for the data channel, as it is shown here. All control and provision of wireless access points management and control traffic exchange between an access point and wireless controller is encrypted and secured by default to provide control plane privacy and prevent man-in-the-middle attack. The control and provision of wireless access point data encryption is optional and is enabled for access point. Data encryption requires a datagram transport layer security license to be installed on the wireless controller prior to being enabled on an access point. When enabled, all wireless LAN client traffic is encrypted at the access point before being forwarded to the wireless controller and vice versa. FlexConnect is a wireless solution for branch office and remote office deployment. It lets you configure and control access point in a branch office from the corporate office through one link. without deploying a controller in each office. And there are two modes of operation for the FlexConnect access point. We have the connected mode where the wireless controller is reachable, and in this mode the FlexConnect access point has control and provision wireless access point connectivity with its wireless controller and can send traffic through the control and provision wireless access point tunnel as it is shown here in this figure. The wireless controller performs all its control and provision wireless access point functions. And another version is the standalone mode. At the standalone mode, the wireless controller is unreachable. The FlexConnect has lost or failed to establish a control and provision wireless access point connectivity with its wireless controller. And in this mode, a FlexConnect app can assume some of the wireless controller functions such as switching clients' data traffic locally and performing client authentication locally. Wireless LAN devices have transmitters and receivers tuned to specific frequencies or radio waves to communicate with each other. A common practice is for frequencies to be allocated as ranges. Such ranges are then split into smaller ranges called channels. If the demand of a specific channel is too high, the channel is likely to become oversaturated. The saturation of the wireless medium degrades the quality of the communication. Over the years, a number of techniques have been created to improve wireless communication and elevate saturation. These techniques mitigate channel saturation by using the channels in a more efficient way. And there are different channel saturation techniques used as direct sequence spread spectrum. This is a modulation technique designed to spread a signal over a larger frequency band. Spread spectrum techniques were developed during wartime to make it more difficult for enemies to intercept or jam a communication signal. It does this by spreading the signal over a wider frequency, which efficiently hides the scrambled peak of the signal, as you can see here in this figure. A properly configured receiver can reverse the direct sequence spread spectrum modulation and reconstruct the original signal. The direct sequence spread spectrum is used in the 802.11b devices at wireless to avoid interference from other devices using the same 2.4 gigahertz frequency. And then we have the frequency hopping spread spectrum. This relies on spread spectrum method to communicate, and it transmits radio signals by rapidly switching a carrier signal among many frequency channels. With the frequency hopping spread spectrums, the sender and receiver must be synchronized to know which channel to jump to. This channel hopping process allows for a more efficient use of the channels, decreasing channel congestion. The frequency hopping spread spectrum was used by the original 802.11 standard walkie-talkies and 900 MHz cordless phone use also the frequency hopping spectrums, and Bluetooth use a variation of this technique. And all of those it is shown here in this figure. And then we have even the orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. This is a subset of frequency division multiplexing in which a single channel uses multiple subchannels on adjusting frequencies. Subchannels in an orthogonal frequency division multiplexing system are precisely orthogonal to one another, which allow the subchannels to overlap without interfering. The orthogonal frequency division multiplexing is used by a number of communication systems, including the version of 802.11 AG and AC. The new 802.11 AX use a variation of orthogonal frequency division multiplexing called orthogonal frequency division multi-access. So as we explained about the channels, let's go now at the channel selecting. A best practice for wireless LAN requiring multiple access points is to use non-overlapping channels. For example, the 802.11 BGN standards operate in the 2.4 GHz or 2.5 GHz spectrum. The 2.4 GHz band is subdivided into multiple channels. Each channel is allotted to 22 MHz bandwidth and is separated from the next channel by 5 MHz. The 802.11 standard identifies 11 channels for North America, as it is shown here in this figure. Interference occurs when one single signal overlaps a channel reserved for another signal, causing possible distortion. The best practice for 2.4 GHz wireless LAN that requires multiple access points is to use a non-overlapping channels, although most modern access points will do this automatically. If there are 3 adjust access points, we use channel 1, 6, and 11, as it explained here in the figure. And for the 2.54 GHz non-overlapping channels, for the standard 802.11 AN AC, there are 24 channels. The 5 GHz band is divided into 3 sections, and each channel is separated from the next channel by 20 MHz. And this figure here shows all of 24 licensed national information infrastructure in 24 channels for the 5 GHz band. Although there is a slight overlap at the tails of each channel's frequency, the channels do not interfere with one another. 5 GHz wireless can provide faster data transmission for wireless clients in heavily populated wireless networks because of the large amount of non-overlapping wireless channels. And the number of users supported by a wireless LAN depends on the geographical layout of the facility, including the number of bodies and devices that can fit in a space, the data rates users expect, and the use of non-overlapping channel by multiple access point in an extended service set and transmit power setting. When planning the location of access point, the approximate circular coverage RS is important, as it is shown here in this figure. But there are some additional recommendations, and all of those are listed here in this slide. When estimating the expected coverage area of an access point, realize that this value varies depending on the wireless LAN standard or mix of standards that are deployed. the nature of the facility, and the transmit power that the access point is configured for. Always consult the specification for the access point when planning to coverage areas. So every network has its own threats. Now let's go through the threats that are at the wireless LAN. Because a wireless LAN is open to anyone with range of an access point and the appropriate credential to associate with it. With a wireless network interface card and knowledge of cracking technique, an attacker may not have to physically enter to the workplace to gain access to the wireless LAN. Attacks can be generated by outsiders, disgruntled employees, and even unintentionally by employees. Wireless networks are specifically susceptible to several threats, which are interception of data, where wireless data should be encrypted to prevent it from being read by eavesdroppers. Wireless intruders, unauthorized users attempting to access network resources, can be deterred through effective authentication techniques. We have the denial of service attacks, where access to wireless LAN services can be compromised either accidentally or maliciously. Various solutions exist depending on the source of the denial of service attacks. And then we have even the wrong access point, where unauthorized access point is installed by a well-intentioned user or for malicious purpose can be detected using management software. So let's go through those attacks. The first thing we do is let's see the denial of service attacks. And those denial of service attacks can be the result of improperly configured device, where the configuration errors can disable the wireless LAN. For instance, an administrator could accidentally alter a configuration and disable the network, or an intruder with administrator privileges could intentionally disable the wireless LAN. It can be as a result of malicious user intentionally interfering with the wireless communication, where their goal is to disable the wireless network completely or to the point where no legitimate device can access the module. Or it can be the result of accidental interference, where the wireless LAN are prone to interference from other wireless devices, including microwave ovens, cordless phone, baby monitors, and more, as are shown here in this figure. The 2.4 GHz band is more prone to interference than the 5 GHz band. To minimize the risk of denial of service attack due to improperly configured device and malicious attack, harden all devices, keep passwords secure, create backups, and ensure that all configuration changes are incorporated of hours. Monitor the wireless LAN for any accidental interference between problems and address them as they appear, because the 2.4 GHz band is used by other devices type, and the 5 GHz band should be used in areas prone interference. And as for the rogue access point, a rogue access point actually is an access point or wireless router that had been connected to a corporate network without explicit authorization and against corporate policy. Anyone with access to the premises can install an expensive wireless router that can potentially allow access to a secure network resource. Once the rogue access point can be used by an attacker to capture the MAC addresses, capture data packets, gain access to the network resources, or launch a man-in-the-middle attack. Personal network hotspot could also be used as a route access point. For example, a user with secure network access enables the authorized Windows host to become a Wi-Fi access point. Doing so circumvents the security measure, and other unauthorized device can now access network resources as a shared device. To prevent the installation of a rogue access point, organization must configure wireless controller with rogue access point policies as are shown here in this figure, and use monitoring software to actively monitor the radio spectrum for unauthorized access points. Because during the attack, sometimes there is a man-in-the-middle attack where the hacker is positioned in between two legitimate entities in order to read or modify the data that passes between those two parties. There are many ways in which to create a man-in-the-middle attack. A popular wireless man-in-the-middle attack is called the evil twin access point attack, where an attacker introduces a rogue access point and configure it with the same SSID as a legitimate access point, as it is shown here in this figure. Locations offering free Wi-Fi, such as airports, cafes, and restaurants, are particularly popular spots for this type of attack due to the open authentication. Wireless clients attempting to connect to a wireless LAN would see two access points with the same SSID offering wireless access. Those near the rogue access IP find the stronger signal and most likely associate with it. User traffic is now set to the rogue access point, which in turn captures the data and forwards it to the legitimate access point, as it is shown here. Return traffic from the legitimate access point is set to the rogue access point, which now captured and then forwarded the unsuspecting user. The attacker can steal the user's password, personal information, gain access to their device, and compromise the system. Defeating an attack like a man-in-the-middle attack depends on the sophistication of the wireless LAN infrastructure and the vigilance in the monitoring activity on the network. The process being with identifying legitimate device on the wireless LAN. To do this, users must be authenticated. After all legitimate devices are known. The network can be monitored for abnormal devices or traffic. So it looks like with all those threats and the wireless LAN, we have to secure our wireless LAN. And there are different ways of securing your network from the threats that exist. So wireless signal can travel through solid matter such as ceiling, floors, wall outside of the home or office space. Without stringent security measure in place, installing a wireless LAN can be equivalent of putting Ethernet ports everywhere, even outside. To address the threats of keeping wireless intruders out of the and protecting the data, two early security features were used and are still available on most routers and access points. And these are the SSID cloaking and MAC address filtering. For the SSID cloaking, the access point and some wireless router allow the SSID beacon frame to be disabled, as it is this figure. You can see that the router is configured to permit two MAC address. Devices with different MAC address will not be able to join the 2.4 GHz wireless LAN. Now, the two features that we just mentioned, the term most user, the reality is that neither SSID clocking nor MAC address filtering would deter a crafty intruder. SSID are easily discovered even if access points do not broadcast them, and MAC address can be spoofed. The best way to secure a wireless network is to use authentication and encryption system. And there are two types of authentication where they were intruded with the original 802.11 standard. And we have the open system authentication, where any wireless client should easily be able to connect and should only be used in situations where security is of no concern, such as those providing free internet access like cafes, hotels, and in remote areas. The wireless client is responsible for providing security, such as using a virtual private network to connect securely. The VPNs provide authentication and encryption services. The VPNs are beyond the scope of this topic, so we will go with the second one. And the second one method of authentication is shared key authentication, where they provide mechanisms such as wired equivalent privacy, Wi-Fi protected access, Wi-Fi protected access 2, and Wi-Fi protected access 3 to authenticate and encrypt data between a wireless client and an access point. However, the password must be pre-shared between both parties to connect. So how this shared key authentication method works? There are 4 shared key authentication techniques as described here in this table. So we have wired equivalent privacy, Wi-Fi protected access point. We have Wi-Fi access protected access point 2 and 3. And for each of those, we have the descriptions and what kind of security of each of those authentication methods offers to the client. So another step is authenticating a home user. Home router typically have 2 choices for authentication. They have Wi-Fi protected access 2 or Wi-Fi protected access. The Wi-Fi protected access 2 is stronger, and here in the figure it is shown the option to select one of the 2 methods of the authentication. We have the personal and enterprise. For the personal, intended for home or small office network, users authenticate using a pre-shared key. Wireless clients authenticate with the wireless router using a pre-shared password. No special authentication service is required. And as for the option of the enterprise, indeed intended for enterprise network, but requires a remote authentication, dialing user service authentication service, or as it's on a radio server. Although more complicated to set up, it provides additional security. The device must be authenticated by the radio server, and then users must authenticate using 802.1x standard, which uses the extensible authentication protocol for authentication. In this figure, the administrator is configured the wireless router with the Wi-Fi access, Wi-Fi protector access to personal authentication for the 2.4 gigahertz. And for the message to be more safe, there are different kind of encryption methods. Encryption is used for protecting your data, and if an intruder has captured encrypted data, they would not be able to decipher it in any reasonable amount of time. The Wi-Fi protected access and Wi-Fi protected access 2 standards use the following encryption protocol. They use a temporal key integrated protocol, as it is shown here, which is the encryption method used by Wi-Fi protected access to provide support for legacy wireless LAN equipment by addressing the original flows associated with the 802.11 weird equivalent privacy encryption method. It makes sure that the weird equivalent privacy but encrypts the layer 2 payload using the temporal key integration protocol and carries out a message integrity check in the encrypted packet to ensure the message has not been altered. And as for the second option, which is the advanced encryption security, is an encryption method used by the Wi-Fi protected access tool. It is preferred method because it is a far stronger method of encryption. It uses the counter cipher mode with blockchain in message authentication code protocol, CCNP, that allows destination host to recognize if the encrypted and non-encrypted bit has been altered. And this is usually the encryption method for the personal network. And as for the enterprise, in this network that have stricter security requirements, an additional authentication or login is required to grant wireless clients such access. Enterprise security mode choice requires an authentication, authorization, and account in radius server. Because this kind of server offer radius server IP address with this is the reachable address for the radius server. Use UDP port number where officially assigned UDP port as 1812 for radius authentication, 1813 for radius accounting, but also can operate using UDP port as 1645 and 1646 as it is shown here in this figure. And they have a shared key which is used to authenticate the access point with the radius server. You can see that in this figure the administrator is configured the wireless router with Wi-Fi protected access to enterprise authentication using the advanced encryption standard encryption. The radius server IPv4 address is configured as well with a strong password to be used between wireless routers and radius server. The shared key is not a parameter that must be configured on a wireless client. It is only required on the access point to authenticate with the radius server. User authentication and authorization is handled by the 802.1x standard, which provides a centralized server-based authentication of an end user. This standard and login process use it uses an extensible authentication protocol to communicate with the access point and radius server. The Extensible Authentication Protocol is a framework for authenticating network access. It can provide a secure authentication mechanism and negotiate a secure private key, which can then be used for a wireless encryption session using the temporal key integrated protocol and advanced encryption standard encryption. And then we have the Wi-Fi access, protected access tree. At the time of this, the devices that support this kind of authentication were not readily available. However, the Wi-Fi protected access to is no longer considered secure. So the Wi-Fi protected access tree, if available, is recommended for authentication method in wireless network because it includes 3 features. It's for Wi-Fi protected access 3 personal, enterprise, for the open networks, and the Internet of Things onboarding. For the personal, threat actors can listen in on the handshake between a wireless client link and the access point and use a brute force attack to try and guess the. Space Shift King. Opposite. Wi-Fi protect center. So once again, do not forget to subscribe at this channel and hit the notification button for the new videos that we'll be uploading. And if you like those videos, share them with your friends. See you soon.